Much. I'm Nabe from Tokyo Foundation, and I'm from Tokyo and Japanese, and I'm a Buddhist and a Shintoist, like our state secretary, and try to be concise, 10 minutes. But first, I appreciate the Vivekananda International Foundation and the International Buddhist Confederation as a co-organizer. Thank you very much. Good opportunity to talk. I'd like to talk. Too early? Too fast? I think of how Japan has digested the Buddhism, and I think the Western origin idea also, such as human rights or democracy. I think that's a common topic. Buddhism, Hinduism, that's religion, and also the kind of the political thought, philosophy. It's not conflicting if we accept it very wisely. I believe the Japanese experience is overlapping with the Indian experience. I think that's good foundation for the future, how we promote two major difficult tasks, conflict avoidance and environmental consciousness. That's what I'm talking about it. I'm a political scientist, born in Japan, educated in the United States. Talking about a political thought or philosophy, sometimes very difficult to understand some foreign nature or Western or European natures to apply to the Japanese society. That may apply to the Indian or any other non-European or American country. The bottom line, I found, like all non-Western society, anyway, Japanese politics, like a policy, have been shaped with both indigenous political thought or a religion and imported idea, getting along with. We should smartly combine. And the people, if like it or useful it, they take it. If they don't like it, they don't take it. We have to be very smart to choose. Probably Japan's one of the oldest important tools as a guideline for the daily life is Buddhism. It was imported 6th century from India all the way and through China and the Korean Peninsula. But nowadays, of course, that's no Japanese think the Buddhism is an import. Of course, they know it's coming from India. Current statistics is 84.7 million Japanese think they are Buddhists out of total 127 million population. I'm one of them. And now Japan has 75,000 Buddhist temples, 75,000. And more than 300,000 Buddha statues. So that's Japanese. But in the historical record, in the 6th century, there was a clearly conflict between Buddhism and the Japanese indigenous religion. Now we call it Shintoism. So always conflict happened. But Japan somehow accepted. Why? Probably it was useful. And the way to accept Buddhism is a kind of loosening commandments. Japanese characteristics of Japanese Buddhism is a relatively weak or loose commandments. That is a secret, how to accept the foreign-born religion. But that doesn't mean Japanese prefer the loose commandment. Seriously, Japan considered how harmonized with the existing idea and the imported idea. Same thing applied to the Western notion, like human rights or democracy too. And clearly, both Buddhism or democracy or human rights, I think it's not completely alien to the Japanese at that time. For example, for the democracy or human rights, considering before such idea came to Japan, Japan developed Japan's own idea similar to human rights or democracy. It's a little bit different because the human rights idea is usually coming from European Judo-Christian society. That the human rights are usually called in the beginning divine rights. Divine means given by the God. That idea is very foreign to Japan because the Japanese don't believe only God. Japanese believe the many gods. So divine, the idea is very, very foreign. So very wise guy in the Japanese philosopher who thinks, okay, let's change the idea of God to the Japanese and the Chinese old notion of heaven. Heaven is not God. But somehow human rights was accepted because it's useful. And Japan already had a tradition. Good governance is good for the people. Samurai class, ruling elite has ethics. They really needed to respect the individual human rights. They didn't say individual human rights. They say that human beings' dignity. And the good governance is a good result, clearly. By the way, the merchant class in the Edo period, that's the 17th century, 18th century, 19th century, they shared somehow such kind of a good civic ethic. But we don't call that the the citizens' movement or the citizens' right, because the notion is different. But shared some idea. For example, Max Weber, that's German social scientist. He actually the created idea. Protestantism is the bed seed for the capitalism, and also he criticized Buddhism and Hinduism is an impediment for the development of capitalism. I think he was wrong if he lived in here and look at the Indian society or Japanese society. But probably he may be right, because Indian and the Japanese tradition is a little bit different from Western development. Probably we have some opportunity to track to the get over current impasse of capitalism or impasse of the limited resources, natural resources, or some troubled conflict. How to avoid conflict too. That's possibility of non-Western origins idea or tradition. That doesn't mean anti-West or opposite to West. We share same element, but experiences are different. Sometimes different experience makes a different result and some opportunity for future. And what is it? That's, I believe, as for the Japan's tradition or Japanese thought tradition, limitation of self-ego. That may sound like opposite to the Western individual, but it's not. Sometimes self-restraint is considering other people, so respecting other individual too, or considering total happiness of people. I'm not talking about, I'm not denying a Western idea or individual idea, but the development is different. Also, some notion already I've heard in the wisdom before my talk. Try to restrain greedy. Greedy means try to develop too much money, too much exploitation of resources. All resources are limited. Human beings actually living in very limited lands and on the earth. Environmental situation is limited. We need to consider. I think that's one thing we could think of. And the experience in Japan or in India or other countries is an opportunity to develop. That's actually very important. We can think of it. And Buddhism was kind of very safe for Japanese now to consider the internationally. I think the reason is less ideological and embedded in the daily life. And people are not so weird. I think, again, the Japanese people are so familiar with the Buddhist tradition, even they don't realize Buddhism is a religion. They believe it's a part of daily life. That's good result, I believe. By the way, you may find the pamphlet on your table. Actually, I'm very glad to find that I belong to the Jishu sect of Japanese Buddhism, and that the founder of Jishu was here, Ippen. This pamphlet says Ippen devoted his life preaching and the importance of practice called Nembutsu. And he's a great guy, but he's too good. And he wrote a lot of writing, but he banned everything because he was too self-critical. Well, I wish he could have left more writing. But anyway, I'm very glad this guy is shared with many wisdom in this place. And I'd like to talk about something, finally, Japan and Buddhism and Hinduism. Swami Vivekananda, of course, you know that this name, of course, that's coming from the great Indian thought leader. And he visited Japan, did you know? And he saw the Meiji Japan in late 19th century. And he commented his impression over at that time Japan just starting to the modern nation-state building in 1897. And he commented, he praised Japan, one thing. He says Japan digests Western knowledge very well. At the same time, maintain indigenous spirit. I'm not sure modern Japan is still what he described, but that could be the model. Clearly, I already shared with Japan's experience, and probably that's overlapping the Indian experience, and not only Japan and India, many Asian countries, and even non-Asian countries experience too. So I observe the respect Indian law to shape an international trouble, such as environmental issue or conflict, with Indian philosophy and experience. Conflict avoidance and non-Western approach to environmental issue. Probably that's one of them. And how? That we need to think about it. But this gathering is a hope that's going to be the foundation to think further. And the Japanese could work with India and other nations, sharing a heritage of goodwill, which has been shaped in our history in order to influence the world better for the future. Thank you very much.